Good day, welcome to Harbor Highlights.
On today's show, we have an amazing story to share with you in observance of Veterans Day.
This and more, stay tuned. Hi, my name is Cole.
And I'm Julian. Have you ever heard of the Red Tails or the Tuskegee fighter pilots?
In 1940, an amazing group of individuals overcame obstacles to become the first African American pilots in the military.
We were able to visit his home in Port Clinton, Ohio, where he was excited to share his story.
A few years ago, a movie came out called Red Tails, telling the story of the Tuskegee pilots during World War II. The fighter plane animations may have been a little over the top, as Dr. Brown remembers telling George Lucas at a private showing, but the courage they faced overcoming discrimination and the legacy they created is more real than any movie could ever portray.
When we came under your command, Colonel, you stated very clearly that we would never find Negroes who could pass a pilot's exam, make it through flight school, survive basic combat. We've done all of that.
What we do, how well we do it, does it matter?
And you all thought what?
You'd sign up, and that'd be the end of 100 years of bigotry. Get your head up, son. You're fighter pilots.
We have a right to fight for our country, the same as every other American. We will not go away.
I can't afford the kind of losses my bombers have been suffering. Can you help save lives?
We can help your boys.
Nothing's difficult.
Everything's a challenge.
Through adversity
To the stars. From the last plane, to the last bullet, to the last minute, to the last man, we fight!
We fight!
We fight!
We fight!
We fight!
We fight!
At all costs, you protect the heavies.
Fighters, 4 o'clock, stay with the bombers.
One bomber, that's 10 men. We count our victories by the bombers we get to their targets. By the husbands we return to their wives. By the fathers we get back to their children.
When we first met Harold, he shook each of our hands and asked us, "What do you want to do? What's your passion? You think you can fly?" We could hardly keep up as Dr. Brown led us to one of his favorite rooms.
This picture over here is a picture of my brother and I. We had just come back from the war. My father, of course, is over on the left. He was in World War I. And my mother is on the right. That's my brother sitting on the right. He was 5 years older than I was. His experience in the military was so different from mine. I was a pilot, an officer. I could fly a mission, come back home, take a hot bath, have a good meal, and have nothing to do maybe the next day. But I would fly a mission the next day. Where he was flying, he was constantly on the front lines, living in all the dirt, the grime, and so forth, with the ground troops. So he led an entirely different life than what I led. Granted, yeah, I faced an enemy when I flew a mission, but I also came home and slept in a nice warm bed and had a nice beautiful steak after I flew my mission. 2 entirely different lifestyles.
Harold was born in Minneapolis in 1924, and he says that it was in 6th grade when he made this life discovery.
That was the time when I fell in love with an airplane. And from that point on, it was nothing but airplanes. I built models, read all the books I could find. I was determined to become a pilot. Now, it just so happened that back in those days, they wouldn't let guys that looked like me fly airplanes. Well, bottom line was they felt we weren't capable, weren't intelligent enough to learn how to fly. And there's a lot of other stuff, but that was the basic reason why. When I was in 1941, I was a soda jerk, and I saved up $35, and I went down and took flying lessons. That got me 5 flying lessons. I thought I could raise another $35 so I could continue my flying lessons, but I couldn't.
There was no opportunity for a person of color to become a pilot unless he could pay for private lessons. He could never become a pilot at the amount of time it would take for him to save.
Well, actually, it took me just about 18 months. But do you know what that $35 would be worth today? How about $745 today? When I talk to youngsters, I usually ask them, and you guys got $745 in your pocket? That's what I had in my pocket, was the equivalent of $745 that I had saved up when I took flying lessons.
Flying for the military would be the only way he could afford becoming a pilot. He wasn't going to give up on his dream, and not even his mom could stop him.
Ma, I'm going to become a pilot. I'm not going to practice the piano anymore. And she looked at me as if I had lost my mind. As a matter of fact, that's almost what she said. Boy, are you crazy? I said, no, Mom, this is what I want. Get on that piano stool. She finally came around and said, okay, Harold, if that's what you want to do, okay.
The U.S. Army would not train blacks to become pilots, but he just believed that by the time he graduated, things would work itself out.
So I graduated from high school at 17, went down, set for the exams, passed them.
In 1939, the military started a civilian pilot training program to have pilots readily available in the event of war. No black man was allowed to serve or be trained in the U.S. military until June of 1941, when President Roosevelt signed an executive order to end discrimination in the military. And this allowed for the 13 candidates to be the first of the Tuskegee Airmen.
6 months later, I heard from Washington, D.C. that I had been selected. I finished my program in May of 1944. A little second lieutenant, 19 years old, thought I was the greatest thing that ever said good morning to an airplane.
President Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor, came to visit Tuskegee in July to see how things were going. Harold was still finishing high school at the time, but remembers hearing the story well.
So she comes, she says, well, how is the program going? And she was referring to, she thought that we were all in military flight training. So she comes out to the field to meet Alfred Anderson, and they explained to her, they said, no, this is the civilian pilot training program. They still will not accept us to go into military flight training. Now, that was back then. Well, she talked to the Alfred Anderson and asked Alfred Anderson to take her up for a ride. And a little Piper Cub, which was the same club, the same kind of airplane I took my first flying in, a little tail dragger and whatnot. They flew around for a bit, and then after they landed, Eleanor, great, she said, well, I'm going to have to talk to the president about all this stuff and whatnot. But they had already approved the program before that ever happened. But at the same time, she was pretty much the conscience of the president. And I imagine, knowing Eleanor, she probably had some very honest and tough conversations with him about what should be done. In March of 1941, he decided and said, yes, there's no more arguing. We're going to train them. We're going to have one squadron, the 99, made up of 35 pilots and 27 aircraft, started. And in July, they named the first class of cadets in 1941. There were 13 of them. And there were 12 college graduates, but one of them, the 13th, was a guy by the name of B.O. Davis Jr. He was a captain at the time, went to West Point, graduated in 1936. He was number 35 out of a class of 275. When you graduate that high, you can have your choice. He says, I want to become a pilot. They, are you kidding? No, that won't happen. So they told him no. So 5 years later, when they decided to train him, he was one of the 13. Let me tell you a few things about the Tuskegee Airmen. There were actually 15,000 Tuskegee Airmen, but only 900 pilots. But we have three bases. We had the training base down in Tuskegee. We had Godman Field, which was training twin-engine pilots. And then you had us, the fighter pilots, which was overseas. Now, out of the 900 pilots, only 355 of us went overseas to fight the war. Now, we can't keep track of 15,000 people. So they only keep track of the 355 that fought in the war. Out of those 55, there's now only 13 of us left. And I am next to the youngest guy. We just come back from Washington, D.C., where they invited 7 of us up. But the 7 of us can all travel. We're all mobile. So we're invited every place. Out of all these guys right here, they're all dead, but there's little Harold Brown, a little first lieutenant right there. And I'm the only one still living out of all these guys.
The 332nd knew they got hand-me-down planes from the other white pilots. Regardless, the P-51 Mustangs were their lifeline in combat. They're quick and maneuverable.
But if you notice, our 51s all got red tails on them. And we were the red tail fighter pilots. Now, all of the fighter groups that were flying, they all have their own colors on the back of the rudder. In the 15th Air Force, where I was flying out of, that was in Italy. We were flying from north to south, bombing all of the targets in southern Europe. We were the red tails. Another group of 51s was the yellow tails. Another group of 51s were the checkerboard tails. They had checkerboards. Another group was the candy stripe. They had stripes all over them. And the reason why that is, here you got all these airplanes flying. We're protecting all these bombers, but we're all assigned a certain group of bombers that we have to protect. And the bomber group has to know who their protectors are. So it's easy because all they got to do is to look at the tail, and they know precisely which fighter group is escorting them. Because there's a lot of airplanes when you go up on a mission like that. I'll give you a perfect example. The mighty 8th Air Force, which was over in England, flying from England east to west, they could put up 2,000 bombers and 1,200 fighters. That's 3,200 aircraft. Can you imagine that many aircraft flying in one day?
Easy, right? All it takes is to look at the tail to know who is friendly or not. But imagine how many planes could be flying at one time, and you might change your mind.
Well, interesting enough, one day I was on a mission, 6 of us. We were escorting a photo reconnaissance aircraft, but they were unarmed, and they were just carrying cameras because they're photographing the place. So they would send 6 fighters up to protect them. And this day we were going up, and he said, "Look over there, you guys." And we looked on the horizon. The lead group was going over the horizon out of sight. And there were groups, and they were still coming up on this side of the horizon. And if you can imagine airplanes from horizon to horizon, it gives you some idea.
The Air Force and all the military at the time were still segregated, and prejudice rules were official policies. Even in Italy, the American generals enforced white and colored rules. There are stories that a white soldier would not salute a higher-ranking officer. Even in training, they were made to repeat exams and told their expectations would be tougher than their white counterparts. They knew to be accepted, they would have to be extraordinary.
Well, at first they didn't know. They had no idea who we were. But all they knew was this: who are those red-tail pilots? Man, those guys really stick with us. Man, who are these guys? You know, and eventually they found out, oh, man, there's a bunch of black guys over here flying those airplanes. After you fly so many missions, you go on what they call rest and recuperation. We go back to Naples. We had a big, beautiful hotel right on the Bay of Naples. I could look across the bay and I could see Mount Vesuvius.
The Tuskegee pilots quickly gained recognition and respect of those they protected.
You must be one of those red-tail pilots. Yeah. They got so they loved us. And like I said, they nicknamed us the Red-Tailed Angels. It got to the point where they were requesting us, hey, a big dangerous mission, who's escorting us today? Are the Red Tails escorting us today? No, we want the Red Tails. So the group commander renamed his airplane by request. and that was the name of his airplane.
Dr. Brown, living in the North, had a different experience than his fellow pilots from the South. He recalls that for him as a person of color, things weren't that different for him.
I saw very little segregation. As a matter of fact, we lived just on the outskirts where the predominantly black neighborhood was. I recall so well there were Swedish people on this side of us. Across the street there were a number of Polish families. Down on the corner of the block there were Jewish families. Right behind us there were two families of Latinos. And this was our little small community. We went to Blaine School, and there was only 3 kids that looked like me in the school. Myself, my brother, and another kid by the name of Fred Kane, and his father was the only colored guy on the police department.
Even though life was better in the North for a person of color, discrimination could still be found.
Now, there were places, it's interesting, the Phyllis Wheatley Solomon House that they built. Any time that a number of the kids that would come up to go to the University of Minnesota, they could not live in the dormitories. So they would live at the Phyllis Wheatley House, and they had several suites on the upper floor of the Phyllis Wheatley House. There's a singer you probably have never heard of, Marian Anderson, who had an outstanding reputation, and she was invited to come up to Minneapolis for a recital. She stayed at the Phyllis Wheatley House because the downtown Nicollet Hotel said, no, we're not allowing her in. Now, that didn't affect guys like me because we couldn't afford Nicollet's Hotel anyway, so it didn't make any difference to us. But there were a few places that did. But other than that, we were downtown, restaurants, theaters, shopping, anything that we wanted to do.
He had so many amazing things to say that we are going to show you the rest of the interview next week. We are so lucky to hear his story because, like he said, there are not many soldiers from World War II still with us.
You won't want to miss next week, where he talks about being taken captive as a prisoner of war and some important life lessons.
You might want to check out the Red Tails movie before next week.
To help support our veterans for the month of November, we are doing a special project for veterans that have been wounded.
The organization provides stamps to be used in therapy, and many veterans find great enjoyment in stamp collecting and stamp-related projects.
Cut used stamps of envelopes and turn them in to your social studies teacher.
Now over to this week's general announcements.
Hi, I'm Zara.
And I'm Kendall. Knitting Club meets today in the library, and Calling Out Color meets Wednesday.
It's time to start thinking about this year's Lift Up. Please, as homework academic class, fill out the Google form for song ideas and if you would like to participate.
In order to participate, you should be a good role model, open to being creative and animated. Be dedicated to not missing the practices and knowing your parts.
Teachers, please help select students that meet this criteria. Not all students who sign up may be able to get one of the parts. The spots are limited. We are hoping to do the Lift Up December 21st, the last day before the holiday break.
Our school is participating in a new program called Direct Your Dollars. Please save your family fare receipts and turn them into the office at school.
We're going to be saving box tops and can also be turned into the office to help our school earn money. Now over to this week's sports report.
Here are the home games for basketball. The white team plays Thursday at Harbor Lights and the black team plays Reese Puffer at Meg Bay.
The swim and dive teams only have a meet this week, Monday away.
Good luck, Panthers, in your first competitions. Back to the anchors.
Thanks for watching our show, and don't forget that every day is a new day and a new opportunity to make it happen.
See you next week. Bye.